Check, check, check. There we are. All right. Well, there we go. Well, good morning. Is there anybody in here that used to play video games or then still does play video games? Yes? Yeah, I was a video game nerd growing up. You know, I went with the very first video game that I got to play was the Atari. Do you guys remember the Atari? Anybody? Yes? Okay. Yeah, that's going back a ways, isn't it? Yeah. We had the Atari, then we had the NES. How many people know what I'm talking about? The Nintendo Entertainment System, the original one, where you take out, what would you do whenever the game cartridge wasn't working right? Take it out and and put it in, and it just magically worked, didn't it? Yeah. I used to like to play, I told you guys before I liked to play Super Tecmo Bowl. That was on the Super NES. That was a great game. I loved it. I also like to play Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Anybody ever play that one before? Yeah. Start off with Glass Joe all the way up to Mike Tyson himself. And man, I remember there was a cheat code that you could use that could take you all the way straight to Mike Tyson. But the problem was, the journey up there got you ready for Mike Tyson. If you just went straight to him, you'd just get knocked out in a few seconds. And I always did it. Well, until one day. And I got to the end, and I beat Mike Tyson. And you would have thought that as a fifth grader, I was the king of the world, man. I was running around screaming on the house, I beat Mike Tyson. Parents didn't care, didn't even know what I was talking about. But I cared, and I knew. One time I got grounded from the Nintendo. I don't remember what I did. Probably nothing. My sister probably set me up. But I did get grounded, and I played too much Nintendo, and so it was an easy thing to ground me from. And so one day, my parents left me home alone. Man, temptation is strong, isn't it? And I turned on the Nintendo, and I started playing. Well, the problem was that whenever the front door was in direct line side vision to my bedroom where my Nintendo was, okay? And I thought, well, I'll hear them pulling up, and I'll be able to, hear the car doors shut, and I'll turn it off. But I didn't. I was probably beating Mike Tyson. I don't know. And I was into the game, and all of a sudden that front door opened. Guys, you never saw a fifth grader move so fast in your whole entire life. I jumped off that bed, and I hit power, and I threw it down, whatever. And my mom knew. I was in my room. And my mom just knew what I was doing. And she come in there, and, of course, I'm, walking around doing nothing. Like, what kid does that? But she absolutely knew. And so I was in there, and she said, "Were you playing Nintendo?" I said, "No. I'm grounded. I would never, I would never." And so she knew, and so she goes over there, and I remember she put her hand on the Nintendo as if like it was a car engine or something, it was going to be warm or something, and my heart was pounding out of my chest, and she looked over at me, and she said, "You better not." And I was like, oh, I got away with it. In fact, the only way she'll know about it is if she's watching this today. I never told her that, yes, I had been playing that whole time. But yeah, playing Nintendo, there was these cheat codes, but wouldn't it be nice if there was cheat codes for life, right? That you would have some obstacle in your life, and you could enter a cheat code, and it would just take you right over that obstacle and right on to the next thing. I last year for Mother's Day, I had a little cheat code that worked out really well. Several Mother's Day, I had told our church, I said, look, there's several of you guys that have forgotten to get your wife anything, okay? So what you do is, and we had QTs up in Tulsa area. Do you guys know what a QT is? Yeah. So we had those. I said, what you do is you go, you say you need to get gas, you pull over, you get some gas, but you go inside to pay, and then you go, and you guys remember those edible bouquets? Do you guys remember those? Well, you take a straw and you put it, a taquito on it, and then you take another straw and you put a corn dog on it or a hot dog, and you just make an edible bouquet right there at QT gas station. It was a cheat code on Mother's Day. Well, last year, I had a little bit better cheat code. how many of you guys hate either cooking or choosing what to cook for dinner, right? Yeah, there's several of us that would say yes. I don't mind the cooking, but I hate the choosing of what it is, or I don't mind choosing, just don't like the cooking, whatever. We're in that boat in the Clark household as well. Every week, it's like, what do we want for dinner? Okay, let's think about this. So last year for Mother's Day, there was this thing called e-meals, okay? I'm not getting paid by e-meals to, tell you about this. It just works. So what it is it was this meal choosing thing, and so like you pay for this subscription and you say, okay, I want to have this, and this week. And it takes all the ingredients that you need and it puts it in your Walmart shopping cart, and then you take out what you already have and boom, you click go and it does it all for you. It was an awesome cheat code and it totally worked out. I finally had a Mother's Day gift that she was actually glad to have. This year, I don't know, I'm taking suggestions. I need something. It's coming in like a month. Well, cheat codes are great for life because they are going to make your relationships better. They're going to make your school career better. They're going to make your life better in your neighborhood, in your workplace, whatever. We all need these cheat codes, and the Bible is full of these quote-unquote life cheat codes, specifically the book of Proverbs. Okay, so we're going to be in the book of Proverbs. We're going to be in a short 4-week series in Proverbs about cheat codes, and the ultimate cheat code is called wisdom. I mean, that is the ultimate cheat code. What is wisdom? Wisdom is the ability to discern or to judge what is true, right, or lasting. That's what it is, to discern or judge what is true, right, or lasting. That's what wisdom is. It reminds me of Dwight Schrute and his kind of life advice. Whenever I'm about to do something, I think, would an idiot do that? And if they would, I would not do that thing, right? That's true wisdom from Dwight Schrute right there. Now, that's not the worst advice I've ever heard, but think about our progression of wisdom as we grow up. When we have little kids in the house, what's happening? They're asking us all kinds of questions. Remember the barrage of questions we used to get, from these little kids, and it gets exhausting after a while. They think that you know everything, and they're just asking you all about everything. And then it goes, whenever they're a teenager, what happens? It flips. You don't know anything all of a sudden, and they know everything. You can't break into that wall that they've created for you, right? They know everything. But then what happens when they go to college? They cannot wait to come home and educate you on what they've known for about 2 minutes, okay? They think they really know whenever it was in college. Then after that, what happens? Whenever we become new parents, isn't this interesting? Whenever we're a new parent, we know that our parents did it, but we don't want to hear anything from our parents on how to raise our kid, right? We don't want to hear anything. Our parents need to just be encouraging and just be quiet. Don't tell me how to parent my kid, okay? You had your time, now it's my time, right? But then after that happens, we get a little older, then all of a sudden we realize, maybe my parents did know something after all. Maybe they weren't as dumb as what I thought, And then this wisdom thing keeps going. Does it actually go back in reverse the older we get? Do we start thinking, we know everything once we hit a certain age and nobody can tell us what to think anymore? And then eventually we start asking all kinds of questions again, like, where are my keys at? And, who are you? I don't know, maybe. Making wise choices is key, but it's hard sometimes. Wisdom is key, and we all know that, but it is hard to make wise choices all the time. I remember just a really, really foolish thing I did one time. On April Fool's Day, did anybody play or get played a joke on you on April Fool's this year? Yeah? Well, on April Fool's Day, I thought I was going to get Logan. I was going to really get her good. And it did not go well. Have you ever had one of those where you were joking and you thought it was going to be funny and then it just did not turn out? Yeah, I've had plenty of those. Well, I called her up one day, and kids were little, and I don't remember which kid I involved. I think it was probably our only child at the time, Charlie. And I called her up and I said, hey, Logan, it's April Fool's Day. And I said, hey, Logan, don't worry. We're okay, but we got in a serious car accident, and Charlie is in the ambulance, and she's going to the hospital. Isn't that hilarious, guys? Isn't that so funny? And I was like, just kidding, got you, and everything. She did not laugh. She did not give me a high five for that at all. I mean, just the look on your faces when I said that, you just all like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm telling you, wise choices are hard for some of us to make any of the time, and it's hard for all of us to make all of the time. Wisdom is key, but it's hard to make wise choices all the time. Now, if we're all offered free wisdom, if we say, look, I'm going to give you free wisdom, who would not go for that? Every single one of us would absolutely take free wisdom. But look around at our society right now. If we all value wisdom and we all say that, yes, wisdom is something that we all want, look around at our society. I mean, isn't it apparent that wisdom, we don't have a surplus of wisdom in our society right now? If there's one thing that our society needs right now, it's a bit of wisdom. And I'm the same way. I need wisdom in my life. Because here's the thing. Who is the easiest person to deceive me? It's that guy looking in the mirror. The easiest person to deceive you is you. And we tell ourselves lies that are not complicated or logical many times, but we fall for them all the time. And here's what happens. When we tell ourselves something that we know isn't necessarily true, we find a way to justify it, right? We find a way to justify it. If somebody is upset with me, instead of taking a look at my heart and seeing if there's any truth to that, I find a way to justify what I did, what I said, and to make them look crazy for being upset with me. I mean, we all do it, every single one of us, because it's painful and it's hard to examine ourselves. It's much easier just to justify ourselves and to think that they're the ones that are being crazy. But here's the dangerous part. This is where it gets really dangerous, is when we tell ourselves a lie, and we begin to justify ourselves. But if we actually believe the lie, that's when it becomes really dangerous, because it becomes impossible for us to lead ourselves at that point. You guys know that you can't lead a liar. You fire a liar. Well, when we believe our own lies, it's hard for us to lead ourselves with wisdom. And we all know what regret is. Regret comes from a series of decisions that we make in our life to lead to that regret. A series of unwise choices that we made to lead to that stupid purchase or that bad relationship. So if we learn to make wise choices, we can have a life that we want instead of regret. And our choices and our habits, they determine the quality of our life, right? The quality of your life right now is determined by the choices and the habits that you have made, that I have made. That's on me. And wisdom, or the lack of wisdom, is how we make those choices. So wisdom matters. So the question is, how do we get it? How do we get wisdom, and where does it come from? Right? So wisdom is a cheat code, and if you're looking for wisdom, you got to turn to the book of Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 1. Go to Proverbs chapter 1 and then look in verse 7. Now, if you got a Bible, remember these old physical Bibles, remember these things? If you got one of those, open it up, but you got to have fast fingers today, okay? We're going to be flipping around, okay? So, Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7. Look what it says. The fear of the Lord is the what? What's the next word? The beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Now, here's the interesting thing. Proverbs begins and then it ends with this idea. that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, the beginning of knowledge, right? Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7, right there, we just read it. If you go all the way to Proverbs 31, it says the same thing, right? And then if you go right away and see that in Proverbs 1:7 that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, we realize right away that wisdom comes from spending time with who? God. God. We find more of it as we grow in faith and knowledge of God. It comes from God, not from the world. Now, here's a dead giveaway for telling the difference between godly wisdom and worldly wisdom. Godly wisdom seeks to honor God through loving others. That's always the case. Godly wisdom is always going to show honor to God through loving others. If it deviates from that, it's not of God. It's worldly wisdom. Worldly wisdom seeks to honor me through using others. Right? That's the difference. Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10. Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10 says this: "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding." Proverbs 10:27 says this: "The fear of the Lord adds length to life, but the years of the wicked are cut short." Listen, if you're spending time with God on a consistent basis, guess what? You're going to be wise. You're going to grow in wisdom. Look, if God created the heavens and the earth, if he created the whole universe, if he set into place the laws of physics, and if he's the one that knit our minds together, if he's the one, if he's the source of wisdom, then we ought to go and get our wisdom from him. We should spend time with God because he is the source of our wisdom. It would be wise to spend time with God. David pled with God in Psalm 25. Look in Psalm 25, verse 4 and 5. Psalm 25, 4 and 5 says this: "Show me your ways, Lord. Teach me your paths. Guide me in your truth and teach me. For you are God, my Savior, and my hope is in you all day long." All day long. Now watch this. In Psalm chapter 1, it perfectly illustrates this idea that spending time with God is going to drip wisdom into your life. Watch this. "Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water." Look at that. That person is a tree planted by streams of water. The significance of that is they're constantly fed. They're constantly getting fed. That's what I want. "Which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers." This is where I was saying it's hard to make wise choices all the time. But if we're planted by the river of God's wisdom, we'll make wise choices consistently and all the time. "For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction." People who consistently spend time with God get a consistent drip of his wisdom in their life. Guys, I want to ask you, I want to beg you, be wise enough to spend time with the Lord each day. Be wise enough to open this thing up and hear from God. This thing is alive and active, and he wants to speak to us. Spend time in prayer every day. And I promise you, if you do that consistently over the length of your life, you will be richer for it. It will not be wasted time. Spend time with God. So not only does wisdom come from God, but also wisdom comes from learning from our own experiences and mistakes. How many would say amen to that? The problem is with this, it takes time and there's consequences that come with this. You know, none of us want to learn from our own mistakes because we don't want to have mistakes to begin with. But wisdom teaches us some things, small things even. Like, for example, after being a youth pastor for almost 25 years, I never opened a 2-liter just real quick, okay? I'm wise enough to know that people will carry those 2 liters, you know, set it on there, and if you open it like a maniac, you're going to have a bath of Dr. Pepper, okay? I always open those suckers slowly, okay? That's wisdom, right? All right? That's wisdom because I've had some mistakes in my life, right? But it's not just making mistakes. People make mistakes all the time, and then they continue to make those same mistakes over and over, right? That's not where wisdom comes from. Just because you make mistakes, you're going to be wise. No. It's learning from those mistakes. That's where you get your wisdom. Now, I've heard people say, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but it's okay because it makes me who I am today. Man, I want us to think a little differently on that. Because, no, I don't think you have to make mistakes to be wise. I don't think you have to make a ton of mistakes in your life to become a great person. You can learn wisdom without having the consequences that you had in your life. You don't have to be in a horrible relationship or get a broken heart to learn that some people don't make good relationship material. I'm so grateful that I have a boring testimony. You know what I'm talking about? I used to struggle with that, guys. I did. Growing up, you'd hear these guys with these crazy, amazing testimonies. Some of you guys in here have an amazing testimony where you were off the rails and God did some amazing work in your life to bring you back from sex or drugs or alcohol or whatever it was, and you were way off the path, and then God used different things in your life to bring you home. Those testimonies are very entertaining, and those are great, and those are an example of God's power to reach anybody, and I love those testimonies. I just don't want that testimony for my kids. You know what I'm saying? I had a very boring testimony. My story is quite boring. I came to Jesus when I was young, and I got baptized when I was 8 years old, barely old enough to know what I was doing. And I never turned away. I believed. I had doubts. I had serious doubts when I was in college. I did. But I sought answers to that, and I got answers, and I got solid answers, and that was pretty much it. I got drunk one time, realized that wasn't the way, and then I turned back. I never really struggled. I don't have a lot of consequences in my life that a lot of people have. I was able to go around those consequences because of a life of wisdom. Man, I think it's great. If you have a testimony that you were way off the path and you found God, hey, you found God. That's great and that's amazing. And you are going to be able to reach people that I can't reach with my boring testimony. But man, I think all of us want that boring testimony for our kids. That we want them to make the right decisions and the right choices now, and not turn to the left or turn to the right. Wisdom comes from learning from our mistakes. But don't be glad for your mistakes. Be glad that you learn from them. That's wisdom. That's true wisdom. But if you can avoid the mistakes altogether, do that. The third one is this: wisdom comes from learning from others' experiences and mistakes. This is my favorite one because there's no consequences for me, right? I look and see what they did, and I learn from their mistakes. It's much quicker and it's painless. This is how somebody becomes wise. Have you ever heard this? Wise beyond their years. It's because they're looking at somebody else's mistakes and they're growing and learning from other people. I heard a hilarious story the other day that some of you guys, anybody know Cammie Ratcliffe in here? Okay. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I heard a story, and I don't know, there's somebody in here that might be able to verify if this is true or not, but apparently it was a hot summer day on the farm, And she was tired of some people picking on her or something. I don't know. But anyway, she went and got milkshakes. Okay. And she was going to offer these farmhands free milkshakes. But she poured a bunch of laxative in there. Yeah, and so she goes out to the farm and she says, "Hey, boys, I got free milkshakes." And of course, they take it up and drink it down. The farm got shut down that day. It was closed for business. Okay. So what do we learn? We know that if Cammie Ratcliffe offers you a free milkshake, you're wise. You didn't have to go through that consequence that they did. You know. Look, this requires us to be intentional. And one of the most intentional things you could ever do is to come to church consistently. Come to church consistently. If you're going to learn from other people's experiences and mistakes, you're going to learn that here. That's why it's so vital for us to come to church and be part of this family of God, right? I say this all the time. Is it a sin for you not to come to church? Absolutely not. It's not a sin. If you got a sports thing that you're going to, go to that. If you got a trip that you're on, go to that, right? We're not talking about sin. We're talking about the gift of fellowship. We're talking about the gift of wisdom that we find here. That's what it is. At very least, you're going to learn from my mistakes. Don't call your wife and tell her that your kid just, got hurt, okay? It's not funny. She didn't like it. Proverbs 3:5, look at this one. Proverbs 3:5, it says this: "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your" what? Your own understanding. Why would it say that? Why would it say that? In other words, learn from God, because it's impossible to get it right all the time on our own. It's impossible. Now, like what we said earlier, who's the best person at deceiving you? It's you. Our heart is deceitful because we tell ourselves what we want to hear. We sell ourselves on things on the most ridiculous sales tactics. We tell ourselves things. Andy Stanley talks a lot about this. If the salesman told us what we tell ourselves, it would be offensive. If the salesman that was selling us that product would say out loud to us what we're saying to ourselves, it would almost be offensive. You might tell yourself, well, I can buy that, but man, my husband or my wife doesn't really need to know about that, But we tell ourselves that, and we hear ourselves, and we believe that. But if the salesman said, well, yeah, just buy it, but you don't have to tell your spouse. Just keep that a secret. We'd be offended, If we tell ourselves, well, if I don't like it, I'll just donate it, But if the salesman said, well, you don't like it, just donate it, just get rid of it. We'd say, are you kidding me? Right? But we believe those lies when it comes from us. We deceive ourselves all the time. A friend of mine, he bought a truck, a really nice truck, and he did not tell his wife. But he started dropping hints to his wife. Man, I really need a new truck. And she's like, are you crazy? You don't need a new truck. We can't afford a new truck. This is not, maybe later down the road, but right now it would be detrimental to us if you bought a truck. Well, he'd already bought the truck. And so what happens? Here's what he did. He bought the truck, and he went and he put it at a storage facility. And he would take his car and he would drive it to the storage facility every day, and he would switch it out for his new truck, and then he would drive the truck around, go back to the storage facility at night when it was time to come home, and then he'd drive his old car home. Now think about if the salesman says, here's what you do. You buy the truck, don't tell your wife, park it in a storage facility, take your old car, just drive. It'd be crazy. But we tell ourselves these things all the time, and we put ourselves in unwise situations. because our heart is deceitful. I promise you. Look, I think I know what's right? But I don't. Not all the time. God knows. God knows. Man, if I'm placing myself in the Word, if I'm placing myself around other godly people, I'm wise. But if I try to get this thing right on my own all the time, I'm going to get it wrong somewhere down the road. And hopefully, I don't get it really wrong. Don't buy the lie. Don't trust your heart. Trust God. He will always tell you the truth, whether you like it or not. Instead, surround yourself with other wise people. This is so key. Right now, I know that I've done youth ministry for a long time, but I've not been a lead pastor for very long. And so one of the first things that I did was I got 3 mentors right away that helped me with these things. And one's in Colorado, one's in Indiana, and one's down in Texas. And man, I call them up almost every week. Not at all 3 of them, but one of them, just a few days ago, I called one up, and he gave me some great advice. One guy, a few weeks ago, we were talking about that there was some changes happening in the church, and he reminded me of something really, really powerful. He told me, he goes, listen, change is stressful even when change is helpful. And I thought, oh gosh, I need to remember that. Change is stressful even when it's helpful. That we have to sometimes give time for change and go slow with change or whatever. He was helpful with me on that, right? Because I'm not going to get it right all the time. I need help. Who you choose to be around determines the quality of your life. And the last one is this. Wisdom comes from suffering. Man, I wish this wasn't true. But it is. James 1:2-4 says this, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces what? Perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Look, the Bible from cover to cover shows us that God is able to speak to us sometimes in the most clear ways when we're in a period of struggle, when we're in a period of suffering. Suffering does 2 things for us really, really well. It gives us the wisdom of priorities better than anything. Have you noticed that? When you're going through difficult times in your life, when you're going through unsure times in your life, or just flat out painful things in your life, suffering gives us that clear vision to give us the right priorities. Sometimes it's the only time in our life where we really see things clearly, what priorities should and shouldn't be. Suffering does that for us, and God can speak to us in there. But the other thing that suffering does for us is it builds strength in us. That the more suffering that we go through, the easier it is for us to handle it the next time around. I mean, we all know this because how many of us were in middle school and something happened to us and our whole world falls apart, and now we look back on that and we think, well, that wasn't that big of a deal, right? Because you're stronger and wiser now. And hopefully the things that you're going through right now, that maybe your whole world is crashing down, that later on in your life you'll look back on what you're going through now. And you'll say, man, I guess maybe that wasn't as big of a deal. Suffering, unfortunately, is a big part of where wisdom comes from. So don't count suffering as an enemy. Man, I know we want to pray our suffering away. How many of us, our prayers are just full of trying to pray away our suffering? Man, I'm guilty of it too. How many of us just want everything that's uncomfortable in our lives just to go away as quickly as possible? I think that's natural for us to not want to be uncomfortable, okay? I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that when you are uncomfortable, when things are going badly in your life, many times, look around because God is about to show up. And he's about to speak something to you in your life that you'll never forget. that you'll be forever changed by. When you're hurting, God knows, and He's wanting to be speaking to you. God doesn't waste pain. He's not going to waste the pain that you have in your life. Don't see suffering as your enemy. See suffering as a friend. One of my favorite poems is this. I walked a mile with pleasure, and she chatted all the way, but left me none the wiser for all she had to say. I walked a mile with sorrow, and narrow words said she, but oh, the things I learned from her when sorrow walked with me. Last one is this. Wisdom comes from asking for it. If it comes from suffering, if it comes from other people's mistakes, if it comes from God, it also comes from asking for it. James 1:5 says this, if any of us lacks wisdom, you should ask God who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. God doesn't want us to be stupid. He doesn't want us to be foolish. He wants the best for you. And in Proverbs chapter 1, verse 20, it says, out in the open, wisdom calls aloud. She raises her voice to the public square. Wisdom is not hiding. It's not a hide and seek game with wisdom. Wisdom wants to be found. Wisdom wants to be in your life. God wants you to have wisdom in your life, and so He makes it available. It's easy to recognize, but it's hard to acquire. When I moved in my garage, we just put all the stuff, we piled it all up in my garage. And there were things that I could recognize that I needed in there. And I would see it, oh, shoot, it's all the way back in there. I'm going to have to move all these boxes and unpack and do all these, It was easy to recognize, but it was hard to get to. Wisdom is like that. It's easy for us to recognize it, but it's hard to get it. There's a high cost to wisdom because it takes us to be intentional in our lives or go through suffering. We either have to be super intentional about getting wisdom or we have to go through suffering. And even in the suffering, we have to be intentional about looking for wisdom. Be wise enough to ask for wisdom. It takes wisdom to know that you need wisdom. Wisdom should be a top prayer request for us every day. Let me say this one last thing. The wisest thing a person will ever do is put their faith in Christ. If we go back to the very first part of the sermon, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. Guys, I know that some of us, we want to do life on our own. We want to do it our way. Man, can I just say that you can avoid a whole long list of consequences and a whole complicated testimony if you just give your life to God right now. Stop hesitating and just go all in. And it's unwise to put it off. It's unwise to toy around with your eternity. Conversely, it is wise to live for Jesus. Your life will matter, and you'll have true purpose outside of just your own comfort and fame and power. You'll have real purpose. But there is a cost to wisdom. Proverbs 4:7 says this, the beginning of wisdom is this, get wisdom, though it cost all you have. Get wisdom. Wisdom is the key to life. I think for my own children, more than anything, I don't necessarily care if they behave right or if they pick the right career. I don't care as much for that as I care that they are wise people. Because if they're wise, they'll find their way back. If they're wise, they'll be able to understand their paths forward. I pray for my kids to have wisdom. And I want you and I to be wise people. Are you wise enough to pursue wisdom? Let me pray. Jesus, I pray right now for wisdom. I pray that all